Emma had always believed there were lines you simply didn't cross, lines defined by morality, friendship, loyalty. The unspoken ones etched into the sand, firm, non-negotiable. Loving your best friend's husband was one of them. But life, she'd come to realize, didn't care much for lines. It had started innocently, as these things often do. Emma had known Claire since college, an inseparable pair through every heartache, every exam, every major life event. They'd roomed together in a cramped dorm with leaky windows and a perpetually broken radiator, sharing late-night ramen and secrets whispered beneath fairy lights. Claire was the kind of woman who lit up a room without trying, her laughter contagious, her warmth magnetic. Emma had always admired her, a little envious of how effortlessly things seemed to come to her. And when Claire met Daniel, it was like watching two stars collide. Daniel was everything Claire deserved, steady, kind, thoughtful. In a way most men weren't. The first time Emma met him, she liked him instantly. He remembered names, details. He held doors. He made you feel like the most important person in the room. But most of all, he adored Claire. And Claire adored him right back. Emma was at their wedding. She stood beside Claire in a navy silk dress, holding her bouquet with shaking hands and a forced smile. Even then, she'd felt the tiniest tug, not quite longing, not quite jealousy, something quieter, more dangerous, but she buried it. She had to. Now, 3 years later, Claire and Daniel had become the golden couple among their friends. The kind people looked at and said, they just fit. Emma was still the third wheel, still the solo one. In photos, still the dependable friend who brought wine and advice and good listening ears, and she was fine with that. Or so she told herself. It was a rainy Thursday when it started to unravel. Claire had flown to Chicago for a work conference, leaving Daniel behind with a list of takeout menus and a joking threat to, "Don't burn the place down." Emma stopped by to drop off a book Daniel had lent her. She didn't plan to stay, but he'd looked so tired, so overwhelmed, trying to cook pasta while answering work emails and tripping over their golden retriever's chew toy. "Stay for dinner," he'd said, and she did. They talked. They laughed. They shared a bottle of red wine and old stories that made her cheeks ache with laughter. At one point, she realized Daniel was watching her, not just watching, with an intensity that made her stomach flutter and her skin flush. She ignored it, told herself she imagined it, but the next week it happened again and again. A text message here, a long conversation there, a shared moment that lingered a little too long. She was slipping, and she knew it. Emma avoided Claire the next few days, not entirely. She answered texts, sent the usual memes, even liked her Instagram photo from the conference. But she couldn't bring herself to call. Not when her voice would shake with guilt, not when her chest felt full of glass. She knew nothing had happened with Daniel. There'd been no kiss, no confessions, no touching. But that wasn't the point. Something had changed. Something had crossed over in the silence between their words, in the way he looked at her now. Too soft, too long, like he saw her in a way he shouldn't, and what terrified her most was that she hadn't pulled away. Friday night brought a familiar knock at her door. 3 soft raps, then one sharp, the pattern she and Claire had used since college. Emma hesitated before opening. "Miss me?" Claire asked, grinning, suitcase in one hand, wine in the other. Emma forced a smile. "Always." Claire dropped her bag with a dramatic sigh and threw herself onto Emma's couch. "God, I hate airports, and business people, and hotels that say they have continental breakfasts, but only offer stale bagels." Emma laughed, relieved at the normalcy. For a few moments it felt like before she started memorizing Daniel's laugh. Before she noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. "I brought gossip," Claire said, wiggling her eyebrows, "and a bottle of cab. You order the pizza, and I'll tell you about the guy from marketing who may or may not be sleeping." With his boss's wife. Emma ordered the pizza. She poured the wine. She listened to Claire's stories and laughed in the right places. But her heart wasn't in it. Claire noticed. Halfway through the second glass, Claire tilted her head. "Okay, what's going on with you?" Emma blinked. "What do you mean?" "You've been weird all week. Distant. Quiet. You're usually the one sending me screenshots of weird Hinge profiles and telling me what podcast I should binge next." Emma smiled thinly. "Just tired, I guess." Claire didn't look convinced, but she let it go. "Well, I missed you. And I've got Daniel back home putting together IKEA furniture, so I fully expect you to keep me distracted." The mention of Daniel made Emma's stomach turn. That night, after Claire left, Emma sat in the dark of her apartment, wine glass still in hand, heart pounding with the guilt she hadn't voiced. It wasn't just what she felt, it was what she wasn't doing. To stop it, she tried to put distance between them. She cancelled plans, dodged invites, declined dinners with vague excuses about work or migraines or errands. But life has a cruel way of ignoring the walls we build. One afternoon she was in the bookstore when she heard her name. "Emma?" She turned, and there he was, Daniel, holding a copy of East of Eden, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. "Oh, hey," she said, too breathless, too quick. He raised a brow. "I feel like I haven't seen you in ages." "Yeah," she replied, shifting her bag higher on her shoulder. "Busy, you know, I figured." "Claire says you've been keeping to yourself lately." Emma said nothing. Daniel stepped closer, his voice gentler. "Did I do something wrong?" She looked up sharply. "What?" "I don't know," he said, a nervous chuckle escaping. "It just feels like you're avoiding me." "Because I am," she wanted to say. "Because if I don't, I'll do something we can't take back." Instead, she forced a smile. "You didn't. I've just had a lot on. My mind. Anything you want to talk about." The weight of his question hung between them, like a knife on a string. She shook her head. "No, just work stuff." He nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Well, I miss talking to you." Her chest squeezed painfully. "I should go," she said, stepping back. "Take care, Daniel." She didn't see him for 2 more weeks. But when she did, everything came undone. It was Claire's birthday. A small gathering at their house, just close friends, a few co-workers, candles, music. Emma almost didn't go. She told herself it was fine to skip it, that Claire wouldn't even notice. But guilt dragged her there anyway. She wore a red dress she hadn't worn in years, hoping confidence would armor her against her own heart. Claire greeted her with a squeal and a hug, already tipsy from champagne. "You came!" "Of course I did," Emma replied, her smile tight. The house smelled like cake and roses. Laughter floated from the kitchen. And then, there he was, Daniel, carrying a tray of wine glasses, pausing when he saw her. Their eyes met across the room, and for a heartbeat too long, the world stilled. He looked good, unfairly good. Dark shirt rolled up at the sleeves showing strong forearms, a slight 5 o'clock shadow framing his jaw. Emma looked away first. The night passed in a blur of polite conversation and internal screaming. Every time he was near, her skin felt electric. Every time he laughed, she felt it in her bones. She was refilling her drink when he approached her in the kitchen. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. Emma hesitated. "Now?" He nodded. They stepped out onto the porch. It was quiet outside, just the hum of distant traffic and the buzz of summer bugs. "I need to say this," he said, voice low. "I don't know what's been happening between us, but I feel it, don't you?" Emma's throat went dry. "You can't say that," she whispered, "but it's true." She shook her head. "Claire is my best friend. I know. That's why I haven't said anything until now. But you're pulling away like I'm poison, and I don't even know what I did." "You didn't do anything," she said. "I did. I crossed a line in my mind, in my heart, and I hate myself for it." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you feel something for me?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. I can't answer that. That's an answer. Silence. She turned away, gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. You should go back inside. He didn't argue. When the door clicked shut behind him, Emma finally let herself cry. She had made her choice, and it was going to break her. The days after that night passed in a kind of blur, a slow, aching progression of missed calls, unanswered texts, and forced smiles. Emma kept herself busy, work, errands, anything to fill the void and distract her from the weight of what she had almost done. She tried to pretend that nothing had changed, that the delicate threads between her, Daniel, and Claire could be woven back together like nothing had happened, but it wasn't that simple. Claire continued to text her, sending memes and birthday reminders, even asking if she was free for lunch. Emma answered with short, distant replies, feeling the sting of guilt with every ping. The guilt was a constant hum, a buzzing in her ears that never let her forget the truth. And then there was Daniel. He had texted her the morning after their conversation on the porch. His message was brief, almost too careful. I think we need some space. I don't know what happens now, but I don't want to hurt Claire. She hadn't responded. She couldn't. There was nothing to say. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. And no amount of distance, no amount of silence could erase the truth that had been building inside her for months. She had fallen in love with him, and that was the part that hurt the most, the part she couldn't tell. Claire. The part she couldn't admit to herself without feeling like the worst kind of person. It was late one afternoon when she ran into Daniel again. She'd been walking out of the grocery store when she saw him pulling into the parking lot. He didn't see her at first. He was preoccupied, reaching into the passenger seat to grab something. Emma stood frozen in place, torn between wanting to disappear and wanting to run to him. He looked up and saw her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then hesitantly he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Hey, she replied, forcing a smile of her own. There was a long pause, the air thick between them. I'm sorry, he said, his voice soft. About the other night. Emma's heart stuttered in her chest. It's not your fault. He shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. They stood there for a few seconds, neither of them knowing what to say next. Do you want to grab a coffee? Daniel finally asked. Just to talk? I don't know. It feels like we left things hanging. Emma hesitated. The temptation to say yes was overwhelming. To sit across from him in a quiet cafe and feel that familiar warmth between them again, but she couldn't. Not like this, not with the truth buried in her chest like a weight. I think it's better if we don't, she said finally, her voice steady but strained. I think we both need some space. Daniel nodded, though his expression looked disappointed. I get it. They lingered for another moment. Then Emma turned to walk away, her heart a tangled mess of longing and regret. She didn't look back, not even when she heard the sound of his car starting, but even as she walked away, she felt the unbearable weight of what was between them. A weight she knew would never go away. That night Claire called her. Emma had been avoiding her for days, but she couldn't ignore the call, not when she knew what would happen if she did. Hey, Claire said when Emma picked up. Her voice was light, cheerful. You still alive over there? Emma smiled weakly, though the joy didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, just keeping busy. Good. So listen, Claire continued. I'm thinking of having a dinner party next. Nothing too fancy, just a few friends. What do you think? Emma felt the familiar knot in her stomach tighten. A dinner party, with Daniel and everyone else. I don't know, Emma replied, her voice small. Maybe I'll pass. You okay? Claire asked, concern creeping into her tone. You've been acting a little weird lately. You sure everything's all right? Emma swallowed hard. The truth was so close to spilling out that it made her chest ache. I'm fine. Just tired. Claire didn't sound convinced, but she let it go. All right, well, you know where to find me if you change your mind. Yeah, Emma said softly. I'll let you know. After the call ended, Emma sat in the silence of her apartment, the weight of her secret pressing down on her. She had to tell Claire. She had to. It was eating her alive, this guilt, this fear that it was too late to fix what had been broken. But how do you tell your best friend that you've fallen in love with her husband? The thought made Emma's stomach churn. It felt impossible, worse than impossible. It felt like the kind of thing that could ruin everything. But then again, wasn't it already ruined? The next few days passed slowly. Emma continued to hide, continuing to retreat into the shell she had built around herself. She refused to go to Claire's dinner party. She refused to see Daniel again. It wasn't because she didn't want to. It was because she knew if she did, she would be lost all over again. And yet the ache inside her didn't fade. It only grew, gnawing at her heart, until one evening the walls she had carefully constructed came crashing down. It was a simple text from Daniel, a single sentence that shattered her resolve. I miss you. She stared at it for a long time, her fingers hovering over her phone, trying to find a way to reply, a way to make it stop, a way to unfeel the pull between them, but there was no way. She typed back, her heart hammering in her chest. I miss you too. And with those words, everything shifted. The message lingered on Emma's screen for hours, the words too simple, too final, to ignore. The truth between them had always been there, quietly waiting in the corners of their conversations, in the brush of their shoulders, in the way they shared moments no one else seemed to notice. But now it was out in the open, written in black and white. I miss you too. Emma couldn't sleep that night. She tossed and turned in her bed, the heat of her body pressing too heavily against the sheets. Her mind replayed the words over and over, each time more urgent, more impossible. What had she done? How could she let this happen? It was all wrong. It was all her fault. She had crossed a line. That had been clear the moment she'd first felt that pull between her and Daniel. But now, the line was blurred, and the space between them felt like an endless chasm. She had no idea how to get back from it, or even if she wanted to. Her phone buzzed beside her, and she almost jumped. Her heart skipped as she glanced at the screen. It was Daniel. Are you awake? She bit her lip. For a long time she stared at the message, feeling a strange pull in her chest. It would be so easy to just text him back, to pretend nothing had changed, to pretend she wasn't caught in a web of her own making, but she couldn't. Not this time. She tucked the phone away and forced herself to close her eyes. Sleep didn't come. Instead, her mind kept spinning in the dark, each thought more frantic than the last. What was she supposed to do now? Was there even a right thing to do? The next morning, Claire called. Emma's heart sank the moment she saw her name on the screen. She hadn't talked to her in days, and now, this conversation would be the one that would break everything. She could already feel the weight of the confession pressing down on her. Hey, Em, Claire said, her voice light and casual. I haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? Emma swallowed hard, her throat dry. I've just been busy. Busy with what? Claire asked, the teasing note in her voice giving way to genuine curiosity. Come on, you've barely answered my texts. You've been so quiet lately. Are you okay? The words sat on the tip of Emma's tongue, ready to spill out, but she couldn't say them. She couldn't ruin everything. Not like this. Not when Claire had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. I'm fine, she said finally, the lie feeling too thick in her mouth. Just need some time, I guess. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment Emma wondered if Claire was about to call her out. But instead, Claire sighed and said, All right, I get it. You know I'm here if you need to. Talk, right? Yeah, Emma replied, her voice tight. I know. Good, Claire said, her tone softening. You've got a lot going on, but just remember, you don't have to do it alone. Emma's chest ached with the weight of Claire's words, but she forced herself to push the feeling aside. Thanks, Claire, I'll be okay. She hung up without saying another word. She didn't know how much longer she could keep lying, how much longer she could keep pretending everything was fine when it was anything but. The days dragged on. Emma stayed busy with work, kept herself occupied with the distractions she had learned to rely on, but no matter how much she tried to fill the space with other things, the ache in her chest never faded. It was always there, a quiet whisper in the back of her mind, reminding her of everything she had lost, and everything she could never have. She saw Daniel once more, by accident. She had been running errands and walked into a small coffee shop near the park. She wasn't expecting to see him, wasn't prepared for the sudden rush of heat in her chest when she spotted him sitting alone at a table by the window. He didn't see her at first, his head buried in a book, but when he looked up and saw her, his face softened. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it quickly shifted to something more guarded. Emma froze, her feet rooted to the floor. The air between them felt thick and strange, like it had been polluted by all the unspoken things between them. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He smiled a little, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Neither of them seemed to know what to do next. It was as though they were stuck in this limbo, caught between what they wanted and what they knew they couldn't have. "Do you want to sit down?" Daniel asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Emma hesitated. She didn't want to. She didn't want to be this close to him, to feel the magnetism between them, the pull that was too strong to ignore. But she also didn't know how to walk away. Not now. Not when the silence between them was too loud to bear. "Yeah," she said finally, her voice shaking ever so slightly. She sat down across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. The silence between them stretched, and she felt the weight of everything they hadn't said pressing down on her. "How have you been?" he asked softly, his gaze fixed on her, studying her as if he was trying to find something in her eyes. That would explain everything. Emma swallowed. "I've been okay." He nodded slowly, as though he didn't believe her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "For everything. For making this weird. I never meant for any of this to happen." Her heart clenched painfully. "You didn't make anything weird," she said, though it felt like a lie. It was already weird. It had been from the moment she realized she couldn't stop thinking about him. I don't know how to fix this." "Maybe it's too late to fix," he said quietly, "but that doesn't mean we can't try." Emma looked at him, her chest tightening with the need to pull away, to protect herself from what she knew was inevitable. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Do what?" he asked softly. "Sit here like nothing's changed," she said, standing up abruptly. "Because everything has changed, and I don't know how to go back to how it was." Before he could say anything, she turned and walked away, her heart in her throat. She didn't look back. Emma didn't expect to feel better after walking away. She knew she wouldn't. She had been running from the truth for so long, avoiding the inevitable, trying to convince herself that things could go back to normal. But now, standing outside that coffee shop, the weight of it all felt unbearable. The truth was, she was in love with Daniel, and that wasn't something she could simply ignore or push away. No matter how much she tried to lie to herself, no matter how many times she told herself it was wrong, the feelings didn't disappear. They just kept growing until they were a part of her, woven into every thought and every moment. She didn't call Claire. She didn't even want to. Claire would never understand. And Emma wasn't sure she could explain it. How, somewhere along the way, the love she had for her best friend had shifted into something more, something dangerous. She wasn't sure if she could live with that truth, but she wasn't sure if she could live without it either. That night, Emma sat in her apartment, staring at the empty space in front of her. The silence had never felt so loud, so suffocating. She could feel the tension in her chest, the ache in her heart that refused to go away. She opened her phone, but before she could open Daniel's contact, she hesitated. She knew what she was doing. She was tempting fate again. But she couldn't stop herself. Her fingers hovered over the screen. Then finally she typed a single message. "I need to see you." She pressed send before she could talk herself out of it. Her breath caught in her throat as she waited. The seconds felt like hours. Then a reply. "Where?" The simplicity of his response caused her heart to race. She wasn't sure what she was doing, but she knew she couldn't take it back. Not now. Not when everything had already been set into motion. She typed the address of a small park near her place, a place they had gone to once before, years ago, before any of this had ever happened. She wasn't sure why she chose it, but something about the familiarity of it felt safer than anywhere else. A few minutes later, a message popped up. "I'll be there in 15. She stared at the screen for a moment, unsure if she should feel relieved or terrified, maybe both. 15 minutes later, Emma was standing by the entrance of the park, her arms wrapped around herself to ward off the chill of the evening air. She heard footsteps approach from behind and turned, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking as conflicted as she felt. His eyes were dark, unreadable, but there was something in them, a depth of longing of something more, that she couldn't ignore. "I didn't think you'd come," Emma said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't sure I should," Daniel replied, his voice low. He took a step closer, but then hesitated, as if unsure whether to close the distance between them. "I couldn't keep running," she said. "I don't know what I'm doing, Daniel. I don't know how we got here, but I can't keep pretending it doesn't matter." "You don't have to," he said softly. "I don't want you to." They stood in the silence for a moment, the world around them feeling far away, as though nothing else existed but the two of them. "I love you," Emma said, her voice breaking with the weight of the words that had been building inside her, suffocating her, until they were the only thing she could say. "I've loved you for so long, and I didn't know how to admit it to myself, let alone to you." Daniel's face softened, but there was a sadness in his eyes now, something that Emma couldn't quite understand. He stepped closer, so close that she could feel the warmth of his body, but he didn't touch her. "Emma," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how we're supposed to move forward." "You can't," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't keep pretending nothing has changed." "I can't. We can't. Not anymore." He reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was gentle, tentative, but it sent a spark of warmth through Emma's body. She wanted to lean into it, to let him pull her into his arms and make everything feel right again. But she knew it couldn't be that simple. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." "I know," she said softly. "I know." They stood there for a moment, their hands brushing together, the tension between them palpable. The world felt frozen, as though time had stopped, and there was no past, no future, just the two of them standing in the middle of it all. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. Emma pulled her hand away from his, her heart breaking at the sudden distance. "I have to go," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "I can't do this. Not like this." "Emma, please," he said, his voice desperate now. "Don't. Walk away. Not now." But it was too late. Emma took a step back, shaking her head as tears welled in her eyes. "I can't stay. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep loving you when it's breaking me apart. And with that, she turned and walked away. She didn't look back, not even when she heard him calling her name. The next few days were a blur for Emma. She couldn't bring herself to speak to Claire. She couldn't bring herself to talk to anyone. She stayed in her apartment, drowning in the silence, letting the loneliness settle in her bones. She had walked away from Daniel. She had told him the truth, and now there was no going back. No more secrets, no more pretending. But in the quiet of the night, as she lay in bed, her heart heavy with the weight of her choices, she knew she had done the right thing. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel easy, but it was the only thing she could do. The love she had for Daniel had to be let go. It was never meant to be. Not like this, not with Claire in the picture. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for Emma to stop, running and face the truth of what she really wanted.